I know that you're probably all very excited and really want to get into this, so I'm not gonna wait too much longer. So officially welcome everyone. I have to say, I think it's probably one of the most exciting tastings we have lined up for the year, and we're like only just ticking through July now. The like beautiful chapter by chapter nature of the Whiskyland series has kind of made this perfect to do mini booklet virtuals with. And even though we are probably, I think, what, up to chapter 20 coming soon now, we're a little bit behind. We're slow readers, is what we will say. But maybe we'll just do like a bumper novella tasting with like 12 drams in the future. But yeah, as I mentioned in my email, it's going to be good when the youngest whiskey is a 26-year-old Laphroaig. And we are joined by tonight by the wonderful, incredible mind and palate behind Whiskyland tonight, Angus MacRaild. So, looking forward to the stories behind the selection of these drams. But before we get into it, just quick housekeeping. There's a full virtual tasting housekeeping video in the Zoom link email. It goes over my usual pointers of 6 glasses if you have them. No stress if you don't. I never do because I hate washing glasses. Don't drink and drive is obviously the most important. That video is up on our YouTube channel as well if you ever need a refresher. Most important for me, tasting notes and questions in the chat. Please pop them in. I love to see them. And I will try and get as many answers for you as I can. I'm going to quickly go through the tasting order verbally for people watching back at home. So we've got the Chapter 9 Gone Grant, the Chapter 8 Tomatin. It's Tomatin, right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, Tomatin.
All right. I'm like trying to remember how to say it correctly so I don't embarrass myself when I'm over in Scotland. Whiskey number 3 is the chapter 12 Tormore, number 11, the Bladnoch then, on to the chapter 7 Springbank, and then finishing with the chapter 10 Laphroaig. So now that's out of the way. Without further ado, let's crack into whiskey number 1, the Gone Grant, and one of my favorite distilleries. And I'll hand it over to Angus to get us started. I suppose probably a bit about what Whiskeyland is in the scheme of decadent drinks.
Yeah, so Whiskyland is really the the sort of replacement for Sponge in some respects, in that when we were thinking about wrapping Sponge up, stopping at edition 100 of Sponge, um, I knew I wanted to do something else, and there was a lot of things we'd learned through doing Whiskey Sponge, and there was all sorts of reasons that fed into the creation of Whiskyland. So the market, the nature of the supply, the sort of limited amount of very old, interesting whiskies we would be able to find, it all suggested that a series of 100 bottlings was something that could be doable over the next sort of 5 years or so. We'd done Sponge for 5 years. I thought, what could be the next 5 years? I knew that I wanted to do something that was still very much about original artwork and humor, and to use that opportunity to be creative in the same way that we'd done with Sponge, and embrace things like satire, surrealism, playfulness. And with Sponge, the character had been the thing that drove it. It was an individual character that went from scene to scene. And so I thought, well, how can we be different but keep some of the nice properties of that? And so I thought, well, what about a world that is the character? So Whiskyland really is the world that is that's the character. It's a bit like the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, but for whiskey. It's really our whiskey culture reflected back at us and kind of inverted through a lens of surrealism and weirdness and humor and satire. And so that is Whiskyland. It's 100 chapters. It's a series of the very best whiskies we can find. It's our flagship series. Decadent Drams is our like bread and butter, day to day, every month bottling series for all our spirits. But Whiskyland is our home for the very best whiskies we can find. And as I say, there'll be 100 chapters. In my head, the vision is, after about 5 years, to get to this kind of perfect square, 10 by 10 bottlings on a wall, and there to be a nice kind of visual overload of all these diverse different artworks, different stories. Each rear label sort of alternates between a sort of postcards telling a little story from Whiskyland with love, or an encyclopedia entry, like a little Wikipedia database of interesting information and research from Whiskyland, reporting back. So there's all these little thematic, conceptual elements that go into it. We work with the same artists that we did on Whiskey Sponge, so there's a sort of stylistic and I would say a little bit of visual consistency there, and obviously it's the same process. It's me selecting the whiskies and designing the sort of concept behind each label and writing the rear labels, and so there's a consistency of tone of voice. There's like a Decadent Drinks sense of humor, tone of voice that goes into the series. So yeah, I'm really pleased with how it's gone so far. I think we've managed to put out some really beautiful whiskies. The series, obviously, it's more expensive whiskies. It tends to start around about £350. That's the sort of threshold between where Decadent Drams bottling might become a Whiskyland bottling that we kind of identified at the start. And it's meant to be a kind of high concept, tightly controlled thing. Sponge was this sprawling universe. Whiskyland is supposed to be, like I say, tight, focused, 100 chapters, high concept, that sort of thing. So some really nice whiskies here tonight. The first one that you're trying just now, Chapter 9, is actually Capradonnach. Glengrant is just our code for Capradonnach, because Capradonnach is the sibling distillery of Glengrant, and it's closed, so it's Glengrant. That's the thing. We have this process where we get around naming restrictions on whiskies by just inventing amusing, silly names as codes for those distilleries. So Clynelish is Candle Kitty, Glen Scotia is Glen Toon, Glenfarclas is Glen Litigious, so on and so forth, and Capradonnach is Glengrant. So this is a 1994 Capradonnach. It's a single second fill barrel, 30 years old, and bottled at natural cask strength, 51.5%. So it's really quite a basic thing. I mean, everything except the last whiskey tonight is a single cask strength. It's much more common that we do that with these sorts of whiskies at this kind of age, because we want to be respectful of these spirits. We'll intervene if we think, like by doing a little bit of reduction or marrying things together. And we have done that with some Whiskyland releases, and there's stuff with the last dram tonight to talk about on that front. But by and large, when you're dealing with whiskies like this and you're looking for beauty, and you often can't improve on what the single cask has delivered at this kind of age from these sorts of distilleries, especially these kind of cask types, like really nice charismatic distillate that Capradonnach was producing in that era in the early 90s, combined with a very sensitive cask type and a 30 years of aging. Like, that's a recipe for real patiently created beauty. So it's not something that we feel we need to intervene with too often. So yeah, that's it. To me, this has got like a lot of the characteristics that I associate with early 1970s Capradonnach, which is that full beehive effect, like honeycomb, flower honey, mead, waxes, pollens, all these sorts of beautiful characteristics, which I just find very luscious and extremely inviting. So yeah, some nice comments coming through.
Yeah, 100%. I like Glenn's call for musk sticks on the nose. It definitely has that kind of warm, sweet tone to it, like almost I think it's a UK based golden syrup, a Lyle's golden syrup. It's
Yeah,
not like as
that's
intense as the ones we have over here. Um, but it's so pretty, and it's everything that I love about Cappadonic. Like, it's just such a pretty spirit, like that beautiful floral. It smells like a summertime wedding, like lots of flowers and just like yeah, lovely vibes around. But they demolished it in 2002, was it?
Yeah, 2002. It was knocked down. Sadly, I think the last distillation was 2001. I'm not sure. I need to go and check. Are there any 2002 Capradonnachs in existence? But yeah, certainly 2002 it was demolished.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
So it's I feel like the longer I go in the whiskey world, the more I'm like, I really need to get my hands on some of these because I can imagine that you're not getting as many casks from brokers kicking around anymore of
There's not
Capadonic.
much in the way of Cappadonic anymore. I mean, there's people that own parcels of it and they sort of eke them out carefully,
Mm.
but there's not too much of it about it now. I mean, it's certainly it's in the similar kind of situation that you had with the distilleries that closed in the 80s, like 20 years ago, where there's parcels here and there, bits and pieces, prices going up. Um, like you saw with Imperial, Imperial has really now dwindled on the market quite considerably, and
Mm.
Cappadonic is probably next in line to really start to disappear. Um, it's the same story with something like Pittyvake. There's a few Pittyvakes still around, but not many. Um,
No.
yeah, I think there's definitely also quite a floral characteristic to this. People are mentioning like mountain air, flowers. Uh,
Mm.
I definitely find that kind of, but like hothouse flowers combined with maybe a little bit of exotic fruit and sort of slightly tropical edge. Um, the Imperial
Yeah.
you bottle was insanely good. Yeah, I actually had a dram of that Imperial last night. It was very, very good. Super waxy. Um, plenty of Cappadonic at Singapore duty free. Okay, maybe that's where it
That's
all.
good. A hot tip to know, I suppose, then. Actually, I'll be going through Singapore duty free, but I think I only have like a 30-minute layover, so there is not enough time for shopping. But yeah, I think that I think all the Capadonics that you've bottled have just been like exemplar showcasings of just how like yeah, rounded and beautiful that spirit is. And like don't get me wrong, I love Glen Grant, but there really is kind of something to be said that yes, they are very different distillates at the end of the day.
Glen, yeah, Glen Grant at the time from the same vintages, it was a little bit lighter, I think. Actually, I think there's much more cohesion between the two in the early era, sort of 65 to 74. And then I think there was more fluctuation, divergence after that. In this same production year, like 94, 95, Glen Grant seems to be a bit drier and more mineral and it has a waxiness, but more of a cereal character, whereas Cappadonic seems much more along this particular sort of profile, luscious waxes, but also sweeter notes, honeys, flowers. So something a bit closer to its earlier era, which wasn't really the case in the 80s and 70s. Cappadonic in that time, I don't think really had that kind of character. It veered off a little bit. So it's interesting to see how those two distillates have sort of floated around over the years, and occasionally they align and then they go off again, much like actual siblings.
Yeah, it is kind of funny that way. Mark, I like your comment. I can't believe I banished this one to the unwinnable position of first in the tasting order. Uh, no, come on. Like I'll put in my, dummy vote for this one at the very least.
Well, I don't know. It's going to be a tricky vote tonight. I think.
Yeah.
I know it's coming up, so
Well,
we'll see.
maybe we'll let you vote three times if you're lucky.
Very
Awesome.
interested to
So
see what the results are.
yeah, I'm too actually. All right, so we'll move on to the Tomatin 30-year-old. I mean, like I'm still reading through the tasting notes you guys have. In fact, honeysuckle is a great call for that one. That is absolutely the warm floral thing that I was looking for. Honeysuckle. But yes, whiskey number two. Oh, I will say, Tomatin's not a distillery I know a heap about, as it were. Um, and not one we
Yeah,
see more
it used
widely
to be.
recognized.
Yeah, it used to be one of the. It was at one point the biggest distillery in Scotland in terms of like malt distillery in terms of output, and it's been sort of not. I don't know what to say. It's been made smaller over the years by having a number of stills taken out. If you go and visit it, you can see where in the still room like there used to be other stills at the back, and they've got a huge amount of fermentation capacity and really a lovely old like Corton steel washbacks, which is pretty unusual. I don't know if that contributes to character or not, but it's different from like modern stainless steel. You get pitting in the steel, which can little bacteria I think can exist in there. So it's somewhere between steel and wood, maybe even concrete as like a fermentation material. So it's really interesting. Um, It's also a distillery which has always had a bit of a funk about it, I would say. So Tomatin is not a big full-bodied Highland distillery. It is kind of like a slightly lighter Highland make, and but it's also one that's had always had quite a distinctive fruitiness, or a possibility of distinctive fruitiness about it. And I like this bottling because I think it really exhibits that slightly more old school Tomatin character, which is slightly overripe exotic fruit, something which also has synergy with older Irish whiskies like Bushmills and Coolies. It's also quite oily and mineral, so like cooking oil, sunflower oil, mineral oil. Um, it, it's a distinctive shift away from like the quite classical old school profile of the Cappadonic. This is something which is old school in a different way and is more funky, more estery, very driven by fruit. It's just a plain old refill hogshead, I think. So yeah, just pure refill hogshead. So the wood influence on this is even lower than on the Cappadonic. This is very, very pure distillate driven whiskey. It's totally up my alley. It's the sort of style I love. For me, it's more of a palate than a nose whiskey. The nose is great, but then the palate is really like interesting and dense and very, very driven by fruits and cereals and like oils. And I think that Tomatin's a really great illustration of you can be big, even though it's nowhere near as big as it used to be. I mean, it used to put out like 11 million litres at peak, I think. Doesn't do that anymore, but it's still a pretty meaningfully sized distillery. You can be big and you can still make really charismatic, interesting distillate. Like this is a distillate which rivals, or I would say is superior to many craft spirits. So it really goes to show that I think sometimes with interesting character in spirit production, you kind of need a little bit of scale, or it helps to some extent.
Mm.
So it's a really interesting distillery. I always recommend people to go there. I like their current output. I think their bottlings are good. I mean, I'm not such a fan of all the everyone does funky wine casks and weird things with that these days. But if you get just pretty pure Tomatin from bourbon or sherry, it's good stuff. We've got a really great Decadent Drams Tomatin bottling out at the moment from Second Fill, just 10-year-old Second Fill Sherry Hoggy, bottled at 53%. That is super interesting whiskey. It's got something of this character, not quite as extreme, but it's got a really interesting fruit engine driving it with a lovely layer of refill sherry over it. Super drinkable, really luscious. This is more extreme. This is just minimal wood and that pure unvarnished distillate, but magnified by age. So really dialing up the notch on those sort of long chain fruit esters and waxes and oils and things.
Yeah,
Nice comment coming through again. That's cool.
yeah, it's super interesting. I will say it's got this like papaya tone to it. And then I can't get it out of my head that it smells like pumpkin, like a Kent pumpkin that you've just unwrapped. It's got that like it's not cooked, it's not anything. It's just that like fresh, funky veg type vibe to it, and like maybe some
Yeah,
candy corn.
I think honey roast root vegetables is always something that you can find in
Mm.
these kinds of like slightly funkier older spirits. And I definitely think exotic fruits, but of the slightly overripe varietal that have been left in a fruit bowl or on a fruit market stand a bit too long and started to go a little bit funky at the edges, but in a good way. You know, in whiskey, it's a nice character, I think.
A
Garden
drinking garden
compost, yeah,
compost on a
that's
summer's day.
yeah, yeah.
Sounds like quick trademark it before the SNWS takes it.
No, I'll just use it for an SNWS. I'm on the
Yeah,
panel, so I
100%.
can
There've
just
been
use
some
it.
SMWS names that I was like, did you have a hand in that? Because that's wild.
Probably. Yeah, the more outlandish, odd ones are probably me. I
But
basically
riding a
just use
duck
it as a hobby.
bareback?
No, that was Robin. That was Robin
Okay.
Lang. I don't really go for like risque ones,
Okay.
but anything that mentions things like waxed androids or something like that, or xenomorphs or velociraptors, or basically anything that
Yeah.
sounds like a literary uh, tasting note that could have been on a sponge rear label is probably me.
There was a period of time where it was all puns, like 50% of the names on the outturn were puns, and I was just like, okay, it was cute the first two times. Like we're really stretching here. I love it.
Yeah.
But yeah. No, super cool. Yeah, everyone's getting lots of apple on the nose. Sunflower oil's a good call, Leo. That's probably what I'm getting as well. But like, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely get sunflower oil in this one. Like it's and there's all this medley of cooking oils like grassy rapeseed oil. That's the sort of
Yeah.
pure popcorny sunflower oil note.
Mm,
So yeah, I find, and again, it's another one where like it's just alighted on a super accessible natural cask strength, like 51.6. So you get richness, power, but it's just really nicely balanced and integrated in with the spirit, and it doesn't get in the way of any of that luscious fruit character. Just sort of helps add to that sense of texture.
mm.
Um, I love whiskies like this. This is the sort of stuff that I would bottle till the cows come home, but it's it's not very commercial. Basically, the story of my entire working life and taste in whiskey, not very commercial.
Yeah. I think so well rounded, so well balanced. It's really quaffable. Like it just hits, yeah, that super drinkable quality for a 51.6%er. So moving away from the 30-year-olds and onto a 33-year-old, we're ending with the youngest whiskey. That's all right. Um, yeah. So, uh, super
Tormore,
cool. Tormore. Yeah.
yeah.
Give
So
us a 60 rundown on this one.
yeah, once again, we're on a single cask. So this is Tormore 1992, and it's 33 years old. And just again, full maturation in a refill barrel, only 157 bottles. So quite a low volume, really, at that age, but with a really nice, well preserved strength, 53.7%. So you get a sense of concentration and power, but you also get a really clear sense of preservation of like the raw ingredients that have gone into this spirit. So where you had honeys and waxes with the Campadonic, then you've got fruits and oils with the with the Tomatin. Here you've got cereals and oils and waxes. It's a much drier whiskey. It's very structured. It's um, it's quite big. It's a lot of cereal, a lot of like pure barley flavors, barley malt, barley extract, lemon barley water, grassiness, quite a dry, almost brittle waxiness, peppery notes. It's quite big, quite powerful, and it's a sort of whiskey that's quite detailed and I think takes time and water quite well. Um, Commands attention. I really like it. I also had a little sip of this last night and I hadn't tried it for a while, and I was like really impressed, especially because the bottle I had it from has been open now for a couple of months or something, and it's really opening up as a whiskey beautifully. Um, yeah, this is one of these whiskies that I think is absolutely at home in a good nosing glass, with just time and patience taken to like really dissect it, because I think there's quite a lot going on there and it's quite complex. It's grown up whiskey for nerds, really. Um, this is not something that I think would. I think this might befuddle newbies a bit, but I think it's yeah, and also like this note here, rich Chardonnay. I think that's a good example. Like it's a wine drinker's whiskey in some respects. Like there's a lot of characteristics here that speak of mature, older, dry whites, like old Chenin or Riesling, that kind of buttery, crystallized honey, dried out flowers kind of characteristics. Old, breads, cereals. Um, so again, unsurprisingly, I'm going to say this about all of these tonight. I really love it. It's my style of whiskey because, lo and behold, I tend not to pick things for Whiskyland that I don't really, really love. I kind of need to fall in love with it in order to pick it for Whiskyland.
Yeah, 100%. But it's interesting, like when you said like Leo's Chardonnay notes, but also I think earlier in the chat we had cheese on crackers, like a big cheddar cheese. It really has that like, yeah, like Michael says, that cheesy funkiness, which I didn't get so much on the nose, but I got it on the palate, and I'm like, I just want to sit down and eat like an entire wedge of fancy cheese with this whiskey. Like it's a a whiskey for pairing with cheese, which is definitely a delicious thing to do. Um,
Cheese and crackers. I didn't get cheese and crackers.
Mm.
Cheese. Interesting.
I think particularly as well, as Glenn said, there's this whole debate in Australia. There's a type of cracker called a Savoy in Victoria, but it's called Jats in like two other states, and I think someone else calls it Ritz crackers. And but it's that like that quite
I, I know
you
Ritz
got
crackers.
yeah,
Um,
it's the exact same thing, just a different name. Uh, and like many things in Australia, we somehow have two names for the same thing in different states, and we beef about it. So, but yeah, I definitely get that kind of like when you've got like a really yeah, when you've got a Ritz cracker and you just
I
kind of
get
hold it in your
crackers.
mouth, that like
I get.
salty, malty. I'm sorry, it's got crackers.
Right. So I don't know if you just have like weird cheese in Australia. Weird
Possibly.
upside down cheese.
None of this Stilton stuff, but yeah, there's this like this lovely, like really soft cheddar Comté. That's it, Comté type cheese.
I maybe get something ever so slightly lactic, but not. Hmm, to be
Mm.
to be determined. I'm not sure about the cheese, but aged cheddar
Uh,
or wash. Okay, I mean, maybe I'm just cheese blind.
I think
Hmm.
it's definitely not like it's not a bad profile, not in the same way that, and we'll talk about this later with
Hmm.
the next round, but like
Okay.
it's it's
Oh
not
my
a
god.
bad profile.
I
It's
don't.
just like
I don't feel like this one's going to do very well in the vote tonight.
could be.
Oh well.
Cheese is great.
I like it a lot. I mean, I love cheese. Maybe that's it. Maybe I just can't see the wood for the cheese. Um. All right. Cool. Well, yeah, that's the Tormore.
I think it's lovely. I think like it's got that kind of elegance that I do want to have it like with a wine and a cheese and a like a whole evening. But yeah, super interesting. They they don't produce any peated there, do they?
They have done. I don't know if they've ever released anything. I know that new owners, Elixir Distillers, will probably produce some peated stuff there at some point. Um, so yeah, we'll see.
Hmm, interesting. Because yeah, I think this with this kind of base with a peat could be just yeah, next level phenomenal as well.
Yeah,
Mm. Yeah, 100%. And yeah, like Glenn said, it doesn't drink like a 55%. It is, yeah, super, super quaffable again. I mean, I think, is it the age that they're so well
yeah. I think that
balanced at?
with older whiskies like this, they wear their alcohol so much more lightly, even if they've got a meaningfully chunky cask strength like this. And I think to me that's a sign of a good whiskey as well, is that it can sort of absorb the alcohol a bit, and you just a good whiskey should just present with flavors, texture. The alcohol contributes to a sense of power, but doesn't like overwhelm. To me, when you're just getting heat from alcohol and burn, that's a sign when something's not quite right, or a bit substandard, or just imbalanced. But certainly, when you whiskies of this age, I think you should be able to sip them neat without too much trouble or intensity. Have I heard if the new owners will be opening a visitor centre? I expect it's on their to-do list, but they want to get Isla sorted first. So Secunder's building this like hyper distillery on Isla, basically like a kind of Bond villain come visitor center thing. And once that's done, then I imagine they'll turn their attention to doing something for the public at Tormore. They have had open days there, but I think that right now their focus is on getting the production sorted, getting their operational stuff on site all the way they want it. And in the fullness of time, um, I imagine a visitor centre will be on the cards.
It's just not in their purview at the moment with other things going on.
Yeah, they're so focused on getting Isla finished, so I think that's absorbing most of their bandwidth just now, which is fair enough. I mean, it's an incredibly ambitious project that they're trying to do there. Costs gazillions of pounds, which they've got to spend, so it's fine.
I mean, yeah, just in the transportational logistics alone of getting stuff onto Isla, just yeah, nightmarish. But going from a kind of cheesy whiskey to a whiskey that I think this is the one I was most excited to try and to taste on the lineup tonight. So I'm not a fan of like young Bladnoch. I'm not a fan of like modern Bladnoch. I just find it tastes like Parmesan cheese, but not in the good way for me.
No, more
But
please.
every single time I've had a 30-year or older Bladnoch, particularly single cask, it has been sublime. So I'm very, very, very keen for this one.
Yeah, this is another, and probably the last we'll ever be able to do, um, uh, single cask, single refill barrel of Bladnoch 1990. So yeah, 35 years old, and natural cask strength of. Let me just get it up because I can't remember off the top of my head.
The
Yeah,
42.
54.2, 54.2, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, refill barrel, 35 years old. 1990 was a very good year in Bladnoch. It seems a lot of um, consistently beautiful bottling seemed to have come out of that year of production, which seems to be the case everywhere in Scotland. I don't know why 1990 a lot of lovely whiskey was produced, probably because everyone was going super slowly and in a kind of unhurried fashion, because whiskey was a bit in the doldrums back then, much like it is now. So yeah, 35 years, refill wood, just super concentrated on fruits, honeys. It's exotic, it's buttery, it's got this sort of Bladnoch buttery lemon grassy combination, but with quite an abundance of green and tropical fruits, like dried exotic fruits. There's also little inclusions of cereals there, a bit of waxiness. There's a lot going on. It's super juicy, super concentrated, super complex. It's got a little bit of everything that we've had in the previous 3 drams, but it's just dialed up a bit. The level of concentration, level of power, level of richness. And also, I would say there's a bit more wood activity in this than the other ones. It's a refill barrel, but there's definitely an element of spice to it, an element of a little bit of warmth of tannin, which I love because I think it just imbues it with even more richness and structure, especially on the palate, and just adds another dimension and another element of power in there. Yeah, charred tropical fruit. That's a really good. I always think of pineapple slapped on a hot barbecue, something like that. Yeah, it's a proper luscious dram. This, and again, another good example of no interference, just as it comes.
Yeah. I assume like the new, well, not new anymore really. The like current ownership of Bladnoch means that just access is dwindling.
Um, yeah, I think so. The I think the way that that distillery has evolved over different ownerships, and also just over time, the amount of those parcels of casks and where they've gone, it's all dwindling. Like the new owners that have it, or the owners that have had it for a number of years now, present owners, I don't think they inherited a lot of stock with the sale. A lot of those parcels of stock were sold off long ago. So this came from a totally different source. And that source is really pretty much dried up now. We managed to get 2 casks of this from one source, and I don't think we'll get any more. And I'm not sure how many people are still holding on to Bladnoch of this age. Gordon MacPhail probably have some. I doubt the distillery have any. Maybe 1 or 2 other sources uh, have some sort of similar casks, but there weren't really many parcels of casks after these 1990s. So I don't think there's much on the market at all, to be honest with you. I'd be surprised if we see many more old Bladnochs. We certainly don't have any. One more is coming then? No, no more Bladnoch, unless we find another source to get some more. But you never know.
Yeah, I think this is probably maybe the third Bladnoch of this age
Tomatin,
that I've
Tormore, Bladnoch. Which uncommercial bottling is the least commercial? Probably the Tomatin and Tormore. It'd be a tussle between those two. Um, I don't know. They're all delicious. That's the main
I,
thing.
I'm curious to kind of know as well how Bladnoch is perceived in Scotland. So obviously, for those in the crowd who are not familiar, Bladnoch is owned by an Australian man, uh, David Pryor. Is it David Pryor? Yeah. Um, so it's really interesting because I know here in Australia, after he bought the distillery, it was kind of this patriotism supporting. And a lot of people really like the whiskey as well. So there was this kind of big, like, oh my gosh, an Australian owns this Scottish distillery and we can drink it here. So there's this very much like set Bladnoch fan base in Australia. But I'm like curious to know if it's kind of a similar thing in Scotland or if it kind of,
I
you
think
know,
people don't think that much about it. Um, I think that people that aren't that fussed by or don't have much of an opinion about the Australian ownership element. I think that the view of Bladnoch is that people tend to divide it into eras in their heads and take a different view on the different eras. So, like this production era, I think people generally love it and it's very popular if they can get it. Then the sort of Raymond Armstrong era, people remember that more fondly for the indie bottlings that were very cheap that he did, and that evolved into becoming Whiskey Broker. I think that's generally fondly viewed in Scotland because people in Scotland like cheap stuff. So they've furnished people with many cheap whiskies over the years, which people like. And then the modern era, I think it has its fans, but I think it just gets kind of lumped in with a lot of, modern whiskey brands, malt whiskey brands, and I think I don't detect any kind of particular strong feeling one way or the other with regarding Bladnoch these days. I think some of the modern bottlings are a little bit, polite to say, unlikely. Like, it's the same everywhere. Weird wine finishes that don't really make kind of sense, but for some reason these companies keep doing this as they see this as a way to differentiation in a crowded marketplace. They genuinely seem to think their whiskies are good with wine, or there's like maybe there is an audience for these sorts of products. But they've also released some really lovely single casks and just their sort of standard Bladnoch bottlings. I think been perfectly good. I've heard that the new stuff they've been making since they took over is very good, but we haven't seen much of it out and about in the market yet. There's lots of casks of Bladnoch available to buy in the marketplace. You can buy casks of Bladnoch quite cheaply, young casks or new fillings. And the quality is meant to be good, but we don't own any, and I haven't seen or tasted any that have been bottled yet. So, yeah,
yeah,
I think it's
interesting.
all a long way from this that we're tasting just now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, we Australia does tend to be kind of the first market for the new Bladnoch releases, and I've tried a few of them. I think touching on your point of like distilleries trying to differentiate themselves, it's so interesting to kind of see what lengths distilleries kind of go to. Like obviously David Pryor is I believe he's got an Indian background or something like that, and so the new releases all have Sanskrit or whatever names, so Vinaya uh, and some others. Uh, and then I know that there was that period where Blatty was putting the Greek word for dialogue, dialogos, on some of their Octomore bottles, and I was just like, why? Where?
Yeah,
How does
it's
this
all
like fit in?
it's all just like desperation to me. It just the whole thing smacks of desperation, just clutching around for any old random idea that will be marketable and can be a point of differentiation from their competitors. Yeah, I've I take quite a cynical view of these sorts of things, to be honest with you. I mean, maybe if if guy that owns Bladnoch has got Indian heritage or background and wants to include that for personal reasons, that I think has a bit more meaning. The Octomore example is just like Greek. What has that got to do with Scotch whiskey or
Yeah,
single malt whiskey from Islay?
I think I called them out for it because I was just like, why? And they're like, oh, we want the whiskey to create a dialogue. And I'm like, but why did it have to be Greek? I remember the bottle came onto the bar at Whiskey and Elmet when I was working there, and Jules was like, I don't know what these squiggly lines mean. And I'm like, I can read Greek. Yes, I know exactly what that means. I don't know why it's on this bottle, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely very interesting. And I think we're probably going to see kind of more of this interesting attempt to differentiate in the future, that kind of ties into the next whiskey, the Springbank 30-year-old. We're having a conversation yesterday about, certain distilleries reducing the amount of production that they have and how it's kind of a not super spoken about at the moment, but there's kind of an overproduction of whiskey in the industry right now.
Oh yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah, I mean, look, Springbank can't make enough to supply what people want, but they're probably the only ones at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah. There is an overproduction, and there has been the, a lot of the problems in the industry at the moment stem from, I think, overproduction on one hand, at the same time as really forcing prices up on the other. And at some point, those two things just crashed in a supernova of nonsense and like illogicality. Uh, so, yes, distilleries like Springbank, I don't know if they've slowed down their own production. I don't think they have. Um, but they're not producing a huge amount. I mean, they're making like 700,000 liters a year or something, which is not big. So yeah, there's been like an orgy of overproduction in recent years, all based on the fact that everyone thought whiskey was in some kind of like permanent golden era, which was just a huge fallacy and obviously not correct. If you look at the history of Scotch whiskey, it's always gone in peaks and troughs, and we're kind of in a bit of a trough right now, and people are reacting accordingly. Um, Hopefully, we'll get through it, but it's sort of it's aligned with an era of what looks like kind of permanent uncertainty in the global market. So until that kind of gets resolved, it's hard to really understand what the pathway out of the present situation is. Um, Orgy of overproduction, Whiskyland artwork theme, possibly, but we're not allowed to have like any references to sex or shagging or erotica on the labels, despite all the like weird Asian and occasional German bottlers that just put like poster girls and like anime porn on their labels, but that's a separate thing. Um, so yeah, this is a Springbank, 1994, Whiskyland Chapter 7, and it's full maturation in a refill sherry hogshead. I think it's a second fill sherry hoggy, and it's just a luscious example of really nice old sherry matured Springbank with characteristics that to me recall like 1960s Springbank, like proper old school sherry cask Springbank. I was absolutely head over heels with this when I first tasted the cask sample, so we were delighted to get it. So yeah, distilled 94, 30 years old, 247 bottles came out of a refill sherry hogshead at natural strength of 48.8%. So it's a perfect natural cask strength as well. It's just immediately drinkable, quaffable. It's a sort of whiskey which really you need like 2 inches in a massive tumbler and just feet up and forget about the cares of the world for a few hours. Um, yeah, I mean, I love refill cask Springbank generally, and I tend to prefer refill bourbon to refill sherry, um, but this one is pretty special, undeniably. And so yeah, hope you like
Yeah.
it.
It's definitely sit in a leather armchair, don't move for the next 4 hours kind of dram.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's beautiful. It's got this almost as well, like American cherry pie, like that really warm homemade cherry pie kind of thing. to it. That like the pastry and the stewed fruits and yeah, just beautiful.
Yeah, it's pretty special stuff, and that kind of elegant dryness and uh, just remarkable like combination of like soft waxes, little medicinal types of peaty flavor in there, like this sort of dry peat smoke that goes towards medicine, and dark fruits. It's just gorgeous. Sherry must feel subtler than Westy Sponge and Whiskyland Chapters. Yeah, it is. I mean, those were absolute beasts. Big, full term, first fill sherry butts. This is sort of refill sherry hoggy. So it's lighter level of sherry. Um, it's very hard for me to pick favourites between all these Springbanks. We've been super lucky. I mean, we also put quite a lot of work into getting these, and it's relationships that I've nurtured and cared for in some cases, like over 10 years, that I knew these casks existed, and uh, we were lucky to be able to get them. But it was also through diligent, careful tending of these relationships and looking after the people that own them. Um, so yeah, that's led to some beautiful bottlings and products that we were very happy to have been able to put out. And this is, this is absolutely one of them. It's a really lovely contrast to the chapter 14, I think it is, that's out just now. Is it 14? I should really know all these things off the top of my head, but I don't. Yeah, so there's another 1994 Springbank that's out in the Whiskyland series just now, which is 1994, 30 years old, just pure refill hoggy maturation. It's a bit softer, it's 44%, but that is exquisite as well. That is just pure distillate driven mineral Springbank perfection, and it makes a lovely contrast to this because it's like refill sherry and pure refill bourbon. If you have them side by side, it's quite an amazing contrast.
Yeah. I think you've probably bottled more Springbanks than any other indie bottler that I know of,
Well,
particularly
I mean,
in a short amount of
apart from
time.
the historic ones, this in over the last couple of years, yes, we've been fortunate. We've been able to put out some pretty special bottlings. Um, I mean, I don't know whether we're going to be able to keep it up. I know that there are a few more casks out there with certain private owners that I would probably be able to hopefully bottle in future. They're waiting for them to turn 30 years old, some of these casks. So there might be another 30-year-old coming next year in 2026. We'll see. Don't know. There might be, in fact, there's another one coming out soon, actually. There's a 1999 coming out as Whiskyland Chapter 19 next month. And no, not well, yeah, next month, August. And that's another one of these like super pure refill ones. It's even lighter, isn't it? 42% cask strength. So it's very delicate, but it's a beautiful, like elegant, mineral, pure, dry. One of these like white wine, very chiseled, soft, waxy mezcal characteristic, super coastal whiskies. 10-year-old does not cut it. Okay.
Yeah. I think, yeah, Leo, I'll be joining you, saving this one till after dinner in front of the TV. Yeah, I'm gonna be sat in bed, just like sipping on this, enjoying the warmth of the whiskey and trying to stay warm in the freezing cold Melbourne. But yes, I think Glenn reckons this might be your first Springbank ever, possibly. Yeah. Wow, that is, it's all like probably I wouldn't try anything else. It's all going to be disappointment from here on. You really started with one of the best. So, um, yeah, just incredible. Great notes, Travis. Dunnage 4, clear sherry influence, plums, the palate's lovely dry coastal mineral, and some dried fruits. Yeah, it's got a beautiful like minerality to it that it's hard to put your finger on what exactly it is, but it's just dry enough that it makes you thirsty for another sip. So, yeah, I love it. Mm.
Yeah,
Alrighty.
beautiful stuff. So yeah, next time we do one of these, we can probably do the other two Springbanks, the refill ones, maybe.
Let's let's see if Chris hasn't bloody nicked them all. Yeah, no, 100%. I think that would be phenomenal to do. But we will finish tonight on the one which I'm sure a lot of people are very excited for. So I know that you were kind of talking about how all the previous whiskies were single casks. Is this
Hmm.
one not a single
No,
cask? What I'm hearing?
no, this is 1998 Laphroaig, and it's a marriage of two refill barrels, which spent 3 and a bit years in a third fill sherry hogshead. So it's two types of refill influence, but it's all refill, and the result is probably my favourite Whiskyland we've done so far. And it's, I think, just I've always wanted to bottle a named Laphroaig. We finally managed to do it. Very expensive, but it's extremely good whiskey. To me, this is beautiful. Pretty old school Laphroaig in that you get fruit character alongside all this medicine, sea, air, coastal notes, as well as fruit. And so, and obviously all that beautiful peat is in there as well. But that peat is sort of broken down by 26 years in wood, and it's I think it's one of these just whiskies where you get perfect, seamless balance of clear, subtle influence from the wood, which has nurtured the distillate. So the distillate and the influences from the wood are all on display simultaneously in perfect harmony. You don't see any joins. You don't see any like lopsided or sort of clumsy influences there where the whiskey's gone from one cask to another. It's a very careful marriage of two refill casks into another type of refill cask, but in a way which has allowed enough time for everything to become properly integrated. Um, I I love this whiskey. I think it's extremely beautiful, and even though it was very expensive for us to get it, I think it is. I think it's pretty exquisite and has worked very well, and it was perfect choice for Whiskyland Chapter 10. Every like we did with Sponge, every 10th whiskey I want to do something a bit different or special. Try to anyway. We'll see. Um, the two barrels were both quite low on their own, so combining them uh, made sense. It made a nice number of bottles, and it preserved there were a lot of good qualities about the individual barrels. They were both quite low, but both retained high strength, so they were super concentrated. And marrying them in that third fill, so pretty gentle refill old sherry cask, was just a nice way to bring them together, maintain that level of concentration, marry them, make sure that it was all really integrated, nice and harmonious, and just add a little bit something extra, very delicate, something extra. And again, the other thing about this is that 57% natural cask strength, been no reduction there. Uh, so it's maintained all this time, despite the whiskies going quite low in the cask with a lot of air there. It's maintained a really high, powerful cask strength, so it carries through the power of that whiskey beautifully. Like all that saltiness, all that peat, all that medicine, and all that fruit character. It gets really well structurally supported by a powerful ABV. So yeah, you can see why this one is kind of like the perfect way to finish.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, I agree, Leo. There's not much of that like traditional iodine and elastoplast on the nose, but I just get like old vintage leather doctor's bag. Um, just like the nose smelling it, I feel transported to like the 1940s, and doctors would make house calls with those leather handbags full of medicine kind of vibe. Yeah, it's beautiful, and like it's still distinctly Laphroaig at the same time, but not in a way that me as a not a Laphroaig drinker is that the sherry just integrates it so well. Yeah, that's incredible. Mm. Do you think you'll ever get your hands on some Laphroaigs like this again, or perhaps do more
Maybe
mixing and chatting?
we're looking at another one just now, but not 98. I won't say any more, but we are looking at another Laphroaig at the moment. which I also think is pretty exquisite. Uh, but this is a special whiskey. I'm very pleased to have bottled this, and I hope that over time more and more people will get to try it, and it will take on a bit of a life of its own. I think it's quite a special bottling. I don't think there's even among 90s Laphroaigs, I don't think there's many that have this character. There's something about this that seems to have managed to unearth a little bit of a old school Laphroaig character, which doesn't, even in the like mid 90s, doesn't generally exist very often. This kind of green and exotic fruit medley, you just don't get that too often with Laphroaig now. It was very common, this characteristic, in like sort of 1978 and earlier years, but it's not so common in by this point in the late 90s. And Laphroaig is my favourite distillery anyway, so this is this was a special, nice thing for me to be able to bottle.
Yeah, incredible. And yeah, like Michael says, astonishing. It's phenomenal. And it's going to make the poll even more difficult for everybody, no doubt. I'll run the poll now that we are at the end, and let me double check that it's all fixed up and correct. Yes. Uh, it's in the chapter number order, not the tasting order, though. So I hope that's okay for everyone's brains if we if we haven't finished all the whiskeys and tell them down. But yeah, I think this is one of those tastings where I will let you pick your favorite three if you would like. You can pick a third because I think that it just everything has been so stellar in a like its own unique way, and it's so interesting as well. Like obviously the first kind of three were tonally very similar, but so distinctly different at the same time. So, Glenn, no, you can't vote for six. Let's try. But yeah, so officially all done with these whiskeys. I want to go back over them again and again. They're really, really beautiful. They're so evocative as well as drams. And I think that like Whiskyland as a series is so evocative uh, with, you know, the cast that you're picking and the story that you're telling on the label and the postcard. So yeah.
Well, it's nice to get good feedback for these whiskies, and it's nice to see that people really like them generally. And yeah, it's good. It's always nice to see that these things are being appreciated, and you know, a lot of work goes into a series like this, along with everything else that we do, we bottle, we select. So yeah, and it's nice that you guys put on a tasting like this and actually open them and get them into people's glasses. So that's super cool.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I'll insert the drum roll here for the oh, I've got the hiccups now. Insert the drum roll for the poll results. So finished now, and I am not surprised by the clear leaders of the pack.
Yeah.
Uh, it's great to see love. See, the Gone Grant didn't suffer from being in first place. It was still memorable enough to get a bit of love. But and yeah, you know, a few votes, a smattering of votes for the rest. But yeah, the Springbank and the Laphroaig, the clear standouts of the night. And yeah, that Laphroaig is
Yeah,
something to behold.
it
So
makes the results make sense. It's nice to see that there's a bit of love spread around. I mean, I don't. I'm not surprised by the Laphroaig Springbank standout. I mean, they are. Yeah, I think by any measure, they're the kind of standouts of that lineup. But it's an impressive lineup nonetheless. I like to think it's, you know, they're all pretty saucy whiskies.
yeah, saucy is great. Great descriptor. It'll be we I know that we didn't touch on it too much about Kythe Distillery, but we have a co-founder of Kythe, Aaron Chan, joining us tomorrow night for the Club Ching. So I think maybe a few of you will be there tomorrow. So it'll be even rougher for Aaron with his bottlings having a follow up to yours. So um, but it's a week of good whiskey all around. Um, but maybe we'll let you have a break and we'll just quiz Aaron about Kythe. Does that work?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. No problem. Um, so Travis asking, when is next sideburn? Would you ever do one which blends a sherry cask in? Yeah, I would, but it's hard to find Burnside in sherry. We do have something that is presently cooking in the warehouse. I don't have a release schedule for it yet, but we've got a 94 and 96 multi-vintage that is presently marinating in a refill hoggy, I think. Yeah, it's all sitting in a big refill hoggy, just stewing away. I sampled it recently, and it's very, very good. So that's coming at some point. But we've got a bit more left of uh, the the previous 31-year-old we did, the one that just the Decadent Drams bottling came out a few months ago. So if you want another sideburn bottling, buy more of the current sideburn bottling, and then you'll, through that noble endeavor, you'll get the chance to buy more sideburn.
Yeah, I see Travis's face being like, I'm about to email Chris and ask him for every single bottle he can get his hands on. I know that we had our Melbourne show recently, and it was, I think, the bottle that I sold the most of. I was like, people were like, "What's good?" I'm like, "Drink this. You want this, 100%." And I actually gave it to the ambassador for William Grants and Sons, the Balvenie guy here in Australia, and he was like, "This is incredible. What is it?" And I'm like, "Haha, your shit, but better."
Yeah,
So yeah, he absolutely they loved it. So yeah, the Burnsides, sideburns, sorry, I'll be keeping an eye out for. But no doubt we have a couple of chapters to catch up on in the future. So I'm sure probably hopefully once I get back from Scotland, it would be audacious of them to host one without me. But yeah, we'll be continuing on these little booklets of Whiskyland chapter bottlings in the virtual tastings for you guys. And yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been a wonderful evening with just stellar drams. So thank you again, Angus, for always sharing your time with us from the other side of the world. I know it's early over there, so yeah, we always appreciate it.
no problem. Thank you so much for putting on these tastings and helping spread the Decadent Drinks love over in Oz. So yeah, much appreciated, and I'm always happy to come on and chat to you guys and answer questions. And yeah, thanks for the nice words about the drams. I'm glad you all enjoyed them.
Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. We'll catch you at the next one. If I don't see you tomorrow night, I'm sure I'll see you at another virtual tasting soon enough. But yeah, take care. Have a wonderful evening.